What if I told you that everything you know about insomnia is backwards? For nearly a century, doctors prescribed sleeping pills to millions of people. For decades, therapists told patients to try harder, to relax. For generations, medical textbooks taught that insomnia was simply about not getting enough sleep, and the solution was to get more sleep, by any means necessary. But here's the truth that took decades to discover. Every single one of those approaches was fighting the wrong battle. The pills, the advice, the techniques, they all started from a fundamental misunderstanding of what insomnia actually is. And this misunderstanding created paradoxes that seemed impossible to explain. How can someone be simultaneously asleep according to brain measurements, yet consciously experience themselves as awake all night? How can trying harder to sleep make you more awake instead of less? How can the treatment that finally works, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, succeed by telling people to sleep less, not more? These paradoxes held the key to a revelation that would transform sleep medicine. Because when scientists finally looked at insomnia the right way, they discovered something that changes everything. Insomnia isn't primarily a sleep disorder at all. Tonight, we're going to trace the journey that led to this revelation. From the stubborn scientist who stayed awake for 180 hours straight, to the graduate student whose rocky relationship with his advisor led to the most important discovery in sleep science, to brain scans that revealed hidden patterns of arousal, to a psychological insight so counterintuitive it seemed almost cruel. We'll explore why CBTI requires you to get out of bed at 2 a.m. when you have work in the morning, why it deliberately restricts your sleep rather than extending it, and why these seemingly harsh strategies succeed where 6 decades of sleeping pills failed. By the end, you'll understand why the most effective treatment for insomnia involves deliberately sleeping less, not more, why it requires less effort, not more effort, and why these paradoxical approaches work precisely because they target what insomnia actually is, rather than what we mistakenly thought it was for almost 100 years. The answer lies not in understanding sleep, but in understanding what prevents it. And that story begins with something you'll do for roughly 30 years of your life, something that remains one of the last great mysteries of neuroscience, something that can heal you or slowly destroy you, something that every human has done since the dawn of our species, yet still confounds our deepest scientific understanding. Let's begin with a truth that took humanity thousands of years to discover. You will spend approximately 1/3 of your life in an altered state of consciousness. Not quite dead, but not quite alive in the way we usually think of living. While you lie there, seemingly doing nothing, your brain becomes more active than during many waking moments. Your neurons fire in complex patterns that scientists are only beginning to decode. Your memories don't just get stored, they get edited, reorganized, some strengthened, and others deleted entirely. Your body doesn't simply rest, it orchestrates a precise sequence of repairs at the cellular level, a maintenance program that can only run when consciousness steps aside. But what happens when this process breaks down? What happens when the very thing that should come naturally becomes impossible? What happens when you lie awake, hour after hour, watching the clock tick forward, knowing that tomorrow you'll pay the price for tonight's wakefulness? Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn, one that will eventually lead us to the revelation that transforms our understanding of sleeplessness. For decades, scientists assumed that insomnia was simply about not getting enough sleep, a straightforward problem of insufficient rest. The logic seemed unassailable. If someone can't sleep, they need more sleep. Simple, obvious, and as it turns out, almost completely wrong. When researchers actually measured the brain activity of people with severe insomnia, they discovered something that didn't make sense. Many insomnia patients showed surprisingly normal sleep patterns on objective measurements. Their brains were cycling through sleep stages. Their bodies were resting. Yet they reported lying awake all night. This wasn't lying or exaggeration. These people genuinely experienced themselves as awake. This paradox suggested something profound. Maybe insomnia wasn't primarily about the absence of sleep. Maybe it was about the presence of something else, something that persisted even during sleep, creating the subjective experience of wakefulness. But what could that something be? To find out, scientists would need to look deeper into the sleeping brain than anyone had looked before. And the answer they found would eventually explain not just the paradox of paradoxical insomnia, but why sleep restriction therapy works, why sleeping pills often fail, why worry perpetuates sleeplessness, and why the same brain mechanisms that help us survive threats can trap us in chronic insomnia. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand what goes wrong in insomnia, we first need to understand what happens during normal sleep. And this is where the story becomes truly fascinating, because it took one of the most stubborn, meticulous scientists in history to reveal that sleep was nothing like what anyone had imagined. The architecture of sleep, building blocks of the night. Before we can understand what goes wrong in insomnia, we need to understand what happens during normal sleep. Sleep isn't a single uniform state. Rather, it's a complex journey through different stages, each with its own characteristics, its own purpose, and its own contribution to your overall health and well-being. When you close your eyes at night and begin to drift off, you're entering a world that scientists didn't even begin to understand until the middle of the 20th century. For most of human history, sleep was a mystery, a daily death and rebirth that happened without explanation. People knew they needed it, knew they felt better after a good night's rest, but the mechanisms behind it remained hidden. Your brain cycles through two fundamentally different types of sleep: non-rapid eye movement sleep, which we'll call NREM sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep, known as REM sleep. These aren't just arbitrary labels. They represent distinct states of consciousness, each serving different functions, each essential in its own way. Let's start with NREM sleep, which makes up approximately 75 to 80% of your total sleep time. NREM sleep itself is divided into 3 stages, progressing from light to deep sleep. Think of it as descending a staircase, with each step taking you deeper into unconsciousness. Stage 1. NREM sleep is the threshold between waking and sleeping. It's that brief twilight period when you're not quite awake, but not yet asleep. Your eyes are closed, but it's still easy to wake you up. This stage typically lasts only 5 to 10 minutes. Your brain waves begin to slow down from the rapid beta waves of wakefulness to the slower theta waves. You might experience sudden muscle jerks, those strange sensations of falling that jolt you back to semi-awareness. These are called hypnic jerks, and they're completely normal. This transitional stage is like standing at the edge of a vast ocean, your toes just touching the water before you wade in. Then you move into stage 2 NREM sleep, which accounts for about 45% of your total sleep time, the largest proportion of any single stage. This is light sleep, but it's deeper than stage 1. Your heart rate slows, your breathing becomes more regular, your body temperature drops. Something fascinating happens in your brain during this stage. Sleep spindles and K-complexes appear. These are distinctive patterns of brain activity that neuroscientists can observe on an electroencephalogram, or EEG. Sleep spindles are rapid bursts of brain activity that last just a second or two. Scientists believe they play a crucial role in memory consolidation, helping to transfer information from short-term to long-term storage. K-complexes are large, high-amplitude waves that might help suppress cortical arousal and keep you asleep, protecting you from being awakened by external stimuli. It's as if your brain is actively working to maintain your sleep, building a protective barrier against the outside world. Stage 3 is where things get really interesting. This is deep sleep, also called slow wave sleep, because of the large, slow delta waves that characterize your brain activity during this stage. In adults, deep sleep typically makes up about 25% of total sleep time, though this decreases as you age. Children need much more deep sleep than adults, and teenagers fall somewhere in between. During deep sleep, your arousal threshold is at its highest. It takes a lot to wake you up. If someone does manage to rouse you from deep sleep, you'll experience what scientists call sleep inertia, a state of disorientation and mental fog that can last up to 30 minutes. Your body takes full advantage of this deep sleep stage. This is when growth hormone is released, when your immune system is reinforced, when tissues are repaired and bones and muscles are built. Your brain waves are slow but powerful, and your body is engaged in the serious work of physical restoration. You spend the most time in deep sleep during the first half of the night. During the early sleep cycles, stage 3 can last 20 to 40 minutes. As the night progresses, these periods of deep sleep become shorter and eventually may disappear entirely, replaced by longer periods of REM sleep. It's almost as if your brain has a checklist. Physical restoration first, then mental and emotional processing. After you've cycled through the stages of NREM sleep, something remarkable happens. Your brain activity suddenly picks up, approaching levels similar to wakefulness. Your eyes begin to move rapidly beneath your closed eyelids, hence the name, rapid eye movement sleep. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes irregular, and your brain waves look remarkably similar to those of someone who is awake. Yet despite all this activity, your muscles experience temporary paralysis, a condition called atonia. This paralysis is protective. It prevents you from acting out your dreams. In rare cases when this mechanism fails, people can develop REM sleep behavior disorder, physically acting out their dreams in ways that can be dangerous. REM sleep is when most dreaming occurs, though dreams can happen in any stage of sleep. The dreams you have during REM sleep tend to be more vivid, more bizarre, more emotionally intense than those in other stages. Scientists believe REM sleep plays crucial roles in memory consolidation, particularly for procedural memories and complex problem-solving skills. It's also essential for emotional processing. Your brain takes the emotional experiences of the day and integrates them, helping you make sense of feelings, relationships, and experiences. A complete sleep cycle. From stage 1 NREM through stage 3 NREM and then into REM sleep typically lasts 90 to 110 minutes. Throughout a normal night's sleep, you'll cycle through 4 to 6 of these complete cycles. The first cycle might be shorter, around 70 to 100 minutes, while later cycles tend to be longer, 90 to 120 minutes. The proportion of time spent in each stage changes as the night progresses. The first REM period might last only 10 minutes, but by the last cycle of VITS, the night REM periods can extend for an hour or more. This architecture of sleep, this careful progression through stages, this cycling between NREM and REM, this shifting balance across the night, is the result of millions of years of evolution. It's not random. Every stage serves a purpose. Focuses on physical restoration, while REM sleep supports memory consolidation, learning, creativity, and emotional processing. You need both. You need all the stages. They work together to keep you physically healthy, mentally sharp, and emotionally balanced. Your sleep is also governed by 2 major regulatory processes. The first is your circadian rhythm, your internal biological clock that runs on an approximately 24-hour cycle. This clock is located in a tiny region of your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, which sits in the hypothalamus. The SCN receives information about light and darkness from your eyes, helping to synchronize your internal clock with the external world. It controls the release of hormones like melatonin, which signals to your body that it's time to sleep, and cortisol, which helps wake you up in the morning. Your circadian rhythm affects not just your sleep-wake cycle, but also your body temperature, hormone levels, blood pressure, and many other physiological processes. The second regulatory process is sleep drive, also called homeostatic sleep pressure. This is the mounting need for sleep that builds up the longer you stay awake. It's controlled by a chemical called adenosine, which accumulates in your brain throughout the day. The more adenosine builds up, the sleepier you feel. When you sleep, adenosine levels drop, and you wake feeling refreshed. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors, temporarily masking your sleep drive and making you feel more alert. These two processes, circadian rhythm and sleep drive, work together to regulate when you sleep and when you wake. They're like two hands on a clock, moving in coordination to keep your sleep-wake cycle running smoothly. When everything is working properly, you feel sleepy at night and alert during the day. You fall asleep easily, cycle through the stages naturally, and wake feeling rested. But what happens when this intricate system breaks down? A journey through the history of sleep science, the stubborn men who refused to let mystery rest. To understand insomnia as we know it today, we need to step back in time and follow the path that led us to our current understanding of sleep. And this path is filled with stubborn scientists, bizarre experiments, and discoveries that overturned centuries of assumptions. For most of human history, sleep was a complete mystery. Ancient civilizations had theories, of course. The Greeks believed that Hypnos, the god of sleep, was the brother of Thanatos, the god of death. Sleep was seen as a kind of temporary death, a passive state where consciousness simply stopped. This view persisted for thousands of years. And it was completely wrong. The revolution began not with humans, but with a plant. In the 1700s, French botanist Jean-Jacques d'Ortus de Meyron made a curious observation. He was studying a plant called Mimosa pudica, which opens its leaves during the day and closes them at night. He wondered whether this daily rhythm was triggered by sunlight or by something internal. To find out, he placed the plant in complete darkness. What happened next would eventually lead to Nobel Prizes and fundamentally change our understanding of biology. The plant continued to open and close its leaves on a regular schedule, even without any light cues. This simple experiment revealed something profound. Living organisms have internal biological clocks that continue to function independent of external conditions. The concept of circadian rhythms was born, though it would be more than 200 years before scientists understood the molecular mechanisms at work. In the mid-1800s, the field of sleep research took another step forward. In 1845, British physician John Davy began studying the relationship between body temperature and sleep patterns, noting that body temperature drops during sleep. This was an important observation because it suggested that sleep wasn't merely a passive state, but involved active physiological changes. The early 20th century saw more significant developments. In 1913, French researcher Henri Pierron published a book titled The Physiological Problem of Sleep, marking the first time in history that sleep was seriously studied as a distinct physiological and health-related phenomenon, rather than just a necessary period of rest. Pierron's work laid the groundwork for sleep science as a legitimate field of study. Then, in 1924, a German psychiatrist named Hans Berger made a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of the brain. Berger developed a technique for recording electrical activity in the brain using electrodes placed on the scalp. He called this technique electroencephalography, or EEG. For the first time, scientists could observe the brain's electrical patterns during different states of consciousness. Berger discovered that brain waves looked different during waking and sleeping states. This was a crucial realization. Sleep wasn't just behavioral quietude, it was accompanied by distinct changes in brain activity. But the father of modern sleep research was undoubtedly Nathaniel Kleitman, and his story is remarkable. Born in Chisinau, Moldova in 1895 to a Jewish family, Kleitman fled to Palestine to escape pogroms and eventually immigrated to the United States in 1915. He arrived in New York City at age 20 with nothing. 8 years later, he had earned a PhD from the University of Chicago with a thesis on the physiology of sleep. He joined the university faculty in 1925 and established the world's first dedicated sleep laboratory. Kleitman was meticulous, rigorous, and deeply curious. He didn't just study sleep in others, he experimented on himself with a dedication that bordered on obsessive. In one famous experiment, he stayed awake for 180 hours straight, 7.5 days, to document the effects of sleep deprivation on his own body and mind. In 1938, he and research assistant Bruce Richardson spent more than a month living in Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, 140 feet underground in perpetual darkness, trying to determine whether humans could adapt to a 28-hour day. The experiment was inconclusive. Richardson adapted to the longer day, but Kleitman couldn't. But it generated enormous public interest and helped establish sleep research as a legitimate scientific pursuit. In 1939, Kleitman published his monumental book, Sleep and Wakefulness. In the introduction, he apologized for his reading abilities being limited to French, German, Italian, Russian, and English. Despite this supposed handicap, he synthesized 4,337 references covering sleep, circadian rhythms, sleep disorders, hibernation, and theories of sleep function. This book became the definitive reference text for sleep research. But Kleitman's most significant contribution came in 1953, and it almost didn't happen. The discovery was made by his graduate student, Eugene Aserinsky, who was frankly not getting along well with his advisor. In his account published decades later, Aserinsky described their first meeting in less than glowing terms. He found a man with a gray head, a gray complexion, and a gray smock at the office door, and there was no joy in this initial encounter for either of us. Aserinsky was assigned to study eye movements during sleep, using an early version of an EEG machine that produced 1/2 mile of paper each night. The work was tedious, and the results seemed unremarkable. But then he noticed something strange. Several times each night, sleepers went through periods when their eyes darted wildly back and forth beneath their closed eyelids. His first thought was that the machine was malfunctioning. Kleitman was skeptical. He insisted that the experiment be repeated, this time on someone he could trust to report accurately, his own daughter, Esther. Night after night, they observed her sleep, and night after night, the same rapid eye movements appeared at regular intervals. On September 1953, Aserinsky and Kleitman published their findings in the journal Science, regularly occurring periods of eye motility and concomitant phenomena during sleep. The title was dry, the paper brief, but the implications were revolutionary. Sleep wasn't a uniform state of unconsciousness. It had stages. It had patterns. And during these periods of rapid eye movement, the brain was nearly as active as during wakefulness. When people were awakened during these periods, they reported vivid dreams. This discovery shattered the assumption that sleep was passive. It demonstrated that the sleeping brain was engaged in active processes. and it suggested that different stages of sleep might serve different functions, a hypothesis that decades of subsequent research would confirm. Based on what we now know about how memories are processed differently during REM versus NREM sleep, and how emotional content appears to be preferentially processed during REM, many researchers believe that REM sleep evolved specifically to handle the integration of emotional experiences, though this interpretation remains an active area of scientific debate. Another of Kleitman's students, William Dement, continued this work. In 1955, Dement documented the cyclical nature of sleep for the first time, showing that NREM and REM sleep alternated throughout the night in predictable patterns. This discovery of sleep cycles was another crucial piece of the puzzle. Dement would go on to become one of the most influential sleep researchers of the 20th century. He founded the first clinic dedicated to sleep disorders at Stanford University in 1970, helped establish the field of sleep medicine, and spent decades advocating for the importance of sleep in public health. In 1968, Alan Rechtschaffen and Anthony Cales published guidelines for scoring sleep stages based on EEG patterns. This standardization allowed researchers around the world to compare results and build on each other's work. The guidelines defined the stages of NREM sleep and established criteria for identifying REM sleep. These standards, with updates and revisions, are still used today. In the 1970s and 1980s, researchers made enormous strides in understanding the brain mechanisms underlying sleep. In 1972, scientists discovered that destroying the suprachiasmatic nucleus in rats eliminated their circadian rhythms. Further research showed that individual neurons from the SCN could maintain rhythmic firing patterns even when isolated in a petri dish, proving that the circadian clock was an intrinsic property of these neurons. Scientists also identified the retinohypothalamic tract, the neural pathway that connects the SCN to the eyes and allows light to synchronize the internal clock with the external world. The late 20th century also saw the identification of key neurotransmitters and neuromodulators involved in sleep regulation. Researchers discovered that gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, plays a crucial role in promoting sleep. They found that neurons in the basal forebrain and anterior hypothalamus release GABA to inhibit wake-promoting systems. They identified the roles of histamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and other neurotransmitters in maintaining wakefulness. In 1998, two independent research groups made a startling discovery. They identified a previously unknown neuropeptide that they called orexin. One group, or hypocretin. The other group. This neuropeptide, produced by a small cluster of neurons in the lateral hypothalamus, turned out to play a central role in maintaining wakefulness and preventing inappropriate transitions into sleep. In 2001, researchers discovered that narcolepsy, a disorder characterized by sudden, uncontrollable sleep attacks, was caused by a loss of orexin-producing neurons. This discovery not only explained the mechanism of narcolepsy, but also opened up new possibilities for treating insomnia by targeting the orexin system. By the turn of the 21st century, sleep science had transformed from a fringe curiosity into a major field of study. Sleep disorders were recognized as significant public health problems. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine was established to set standards for diagnosis and treatment. Sleep clinics proliferated. Researchers began studying the connections between sleep and other aspects of health, discovering links to cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, immune function, mental health, and cognitive performance. Today we understand sleep in ways that Kleitman could never have imagined. We can monitor brain activity, eye movements, muscle tone, heart rate, breathing, and oxygen levels throughout the night. We can see which parts of the brain are active during different sleep stages. We can measure the levels of various neurotransmitters and hormones. We know that sleep isn't just important, it's absolutely essential. Studies in rats have shown that total sleep deprivation is fatal, with death occurring within 2 to 3 weeks. Yet despite all this knowledge, sleep disorders remain common, poorly understood in many ways, and often inadequately treated. Insomnia, in particular, affects millions of people and can have profound effects on health, quality of life, and daily functioning. To understand insomnia, we need to move from the laboratory into the lived experience of those who struggle to sleep. Defining insomnia, more than just lost sleep. Insomnia isn't simply a matter of not sleeping enough. Almost everyone has occasional nights of poor sleep. You might lie awake worrying about an important presentation the next day. You might wake repeatedly because your neighbor is having a loud party. You might have trouble falling asleep after drinking too much coffee in the evening. These experiences are common and, in most cases, temporary. They don't constitute insomnia disorder. True insomnia is characterized by persistent difficulty with sleep, despite having adequate opportunity to sleep. It's the chronic inability to initiate sleep, maintain sleep, or achieve restorative sleep, accompanied by significant distress or impairment in daytime functioning. This definition contains several important elements. First, the sleep difficulty must be persistent, not just occasional. Second, you must have adequate opportunity to sleep. If you're only getting 4 hours of sleep because you're working 2 jobs and taking care of young children, that's sleep deprivation, not insomnia. Third, the sleep problems must cause meaningful consequences in your waking life. The current diagnostic criteria, as outlined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, text revision, DSM-5-TR, and the International Classification of Sleep Disorders, 3rd edition, ICSD-3, define insomnia disorder with specific parameters. You must have a sleep disturbance characterized by one or more of the following: difficulty initiating sleep, meaning you can't fall asleep within about 20 to 30 minutes. Difficulty maintaining sleep, with frequent awakenings or problems returning to sleep after waking. Or early morning awakening with inability to return to sleep. These sleep difficulties must occur at least 3 nights per week. They must persist for at least 3 months. They must occur despite adequate opportunity for sleep. And they must cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, educational, or other important areas of functioning. This definition represents a major change from earlier diagnostic systems. In previous versions of the DSM and the ICSD, insomnia was categorized into multiple subtypes. There was primary insomnia, which occurred independently, and secondary insomnia, which was attributed to another medical or psychiatric condition. There were specific categories like psychophysiological insomnia, paradoxical insomnia, and idiopathic insomnia, each defined by different characteristics and presumed causes. The move to a simpler, unified diagnosis of insomnia disorder reflects an important shift in thinking. Research showed that trying to distinguish between primary and secondary insomnia was often arbitrary and unhelpful. Insomnia frequently occurs alongside other conditions: depression, anxiety, chronic pain, sleep apnea, but it's often unclear which came first or whether one causes the other. More importantly, insomnia often persists even after the associated condition is successfully treated. A person might develop insomnia during a depressive episode, but the insomnia continues even after the depression resolves. This suggests that insomnia, once established, becomes a condition in its own right, with its own maintaining factors, regardless of what initially triggered it. The current diagnostic approach recognizes this reality. Whether insomnia occurs alone or alongside another condition, whether it started in response to a life stressor or appeared without obvious cause, it's all classified as insomnia disorder if it meets the diagnostic criteria. The focus shifts from trying to determine the original cause to addressing the factors that perpetuate the insomnia in the present. However, clinicians and researchers still make some important distinctions. Acute insomnia, also called short-term or adjustment insomnia, lasts less than 3 months. It's often triggered by a clear stressor, a divorce, a job loss, a death in the family, a major illness. Most people experience acute insomnia at some point in their lives. In many cases, acute insomnia resolves on its own once the stressor passes or the person adapts to the new situation. Chronic insomnia, by contrast, persists for 3 months or longer and occurs at least 3 nights per week. This is the form of insomnia that typically requires treatment. Chronic insomnia affects approximately 6 to 10% of the adult population, though estimates vary depending on how strictly criteria are applied. When you include people who have insomnia symptoms but don't meet full diagnostic criteria, the prevalence climbs to 30 to 50%. That's an enormous number of people whose sleep is disrupted. Insomnia symptoms can take different forms. Sleep-onset insomnia means difficulty falling asleep at the beginning of the night. You lie in bed, tired but unable to transition into sleep, your mind racing or simply alert when it should be winding down. Sleep maintenance insomnia involves waking frequently during the night and having trouble getting back to sleep. You might wake every hour or two, spending long stretches staring at the ceiling. Early morning awakening means waking up well before your desired time. Say, waking at 3 a.m. when you intended to sleep until 6 a.m. and being unable to return to sleep. Some people experience all three. Others have predominantly one type of symptom. The consequences of chronic insomnia extend far beyond feeling tired. During the day, people with insomnia often experience difficulty concentrating, memory problems, irritability, mood disturbances, and reduced motivation. Their work performance may suffer. Their relationships may be strained. They may have difficulty enjoying activities they once loved. They may feel physically unwell, with headaches, gastrointestinal problems, or muscle tension. Over time, chronic insomnia increases the risk of numerous health problems, which we'll explore in detail later. One particularly interesting phenomenon is sleep state misperception, also called paradoxical insomnia. Some people with insomnia report lying awake for hours or getting almost no sleep at all, yet objective measurements with polysomnography, a comprehensive sleep study that records brain activity, eye movements, muscle activity, heart rate, and breathing, show that they're actually sleeping much more than they perceive. Their sleep might be fragmented or lighter than normal, but they're sleeping. This isn't malingering or exaggeration. These individuals genuinely experience themselves as awake. Their subjective experience doesn't match the objective data. This highlights an important point. Insomnia is partly defined by the person's experience of their sleep. If you feel that your sleep is inadequate, and this belief causes distress or impairment, that matters, regardless of what a sleep study shows. On the flip side, some people sleep very little by nature and feel perfectly fine. These short sleepers might get only 4 or 5 hours of sleep per night, but wake feeling refreshed, function well during the day, and don't experience distress about their sleep. They don't have insomnia, they simply have low sleep needs. Sleep needs vary considerably across individuals. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night for optimal functioning, but there's a wide range of normal variation. Insomnia becomes more common with age. Older adults are more likely than younger adults to report insomnia symptoms, partly due to changes in sleep architecture that occur naturally with aging. As you get older, you spend less time in deep sleep, and more time in the lighter stages of sleep. You may wake more frequently during the night. Your circadian rhythm may shift earlier, making you sleepy earlier in the evening and waking earlier in the morning. These changes can contribute to insomnia, though it's important to note that poor sleep is not an inevitable part of aging. Many older adults sleep well. Insomnia is more prevalent in women than men, particularly after menopause. Hormonal changes, such as fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone, can affect sleep quality. Pregnancy can also disrupt sleep, particularly in the third trimester, when physical discomfort and frequent urination make continuous sleep difficult. Life circumstances and social roles may also contribute to gender differences in insomnia prevalence. Certain personality traits and psychological characteristics increase vulnerability to insomnia. People who are anxious, prone to worry, or have a tendency to ruminate are more likely to develop insomnia. People who are perfectionistic or have difficulty relaxing are also at higher risk. These traits don't cause insomnia directly, but they create a vulnerability, a tendency to respond to sleep disruption in ways that perpetuate the problem. The picture that emerges is one of complexity. Insomnia isn't a simple, uniform condition. It's a heterogeneous disorder with multiple contributing factors, varying presentations, and diverse consequences. To truly understand it, we need to look deeper into the brain mechanisms and psychological processes that underlie the experience of lying awake when you desperately want to sleep. The neuroscience of sleeplessness. When the brain won't rest. At the heart of insomnia lies a seemingly paradoxical problem that puzzled scientists for decades. Sleep is a basic biological need, regulated by powerful homeostatic mechanisms. The longer you've been awake, the stronger your sleep drive becomes through the accumulation of adenosine in your brain. Your circadian rhythm signals when it's time to sleep through the release of melatonin. These systems should make falling asleep inevitable, like gravity pulling you down. So why do people with insomnia lie awake despite being exhausted? What's happening in their brains that overrides these fundamental drives? The answer, when it finally emerged from brain, imaging studies and physiological measurements, was both elegant and disturbing. People with chronic insomnia aren't simply lacking sleep. They're trapped in a state of hyperarousal. The most compelling evidence came from an unexpected source. Established scientific finding. In 2004, researcher Eric Nofzinger and his colleagues used positron emission tomography, PET scanning, to measure glucose metabolism in the brains of people with insomnia. Glucose metabolism is a marker of neural activity. The more active a brain region is, the more glucose it consumes. The researchers expected to see reduced brain activity during sleep in insomnia patients, reflecting their difficulty sleeping. What they found was the opposite, and this is documented, peer-reviewed, replicated research. People with insomnia showed higher global brain metabolism than good sleepers, not just while awake, but during sleep itself. Their brains simply didn't power down as much as they should. Even more striking, the researchers found that people with insomnia showed a smaller decline in brain metabolism when transitioning from wakefulness to sleep, particularly in wake-promoting regions like the hypothalamus and brainstem. This suggested that their arousal systems weren't deactivating properly at night. The theoretical model built from these findings. This discovery gave birth to the hyperarousal model of insomnia, which proposes that individuals with chronic insomnia exist in a state of heightened physiological, cognitive, and cortical activation that extends throughout the 24-hour day. Essentially, their brains and bodies are stuck in a mode of persistent alertness. This model is now widely accepted in sleep medicine, though researchers continue to refine our understanding of the mechanisms involved. This was a crucial breakthrough, but it was only the first piece of the puzzle. Remember the paradox we started with. How can someone be asleep according to brain measurements yet experience themselves as awake? Hyperarousal explains part of it. If your brain maintains higher activation even during sleep, you might remain more aware of your surroundings, more prone to brief arousals, more likely to perceive yourself as awake. But there's more to the story, and we'll return to this mystery. But here's where the story gets more complex and more interesting. Not everyone with insomnia shows these objective markers of hyperarousal. Some people report severe insomnia, yet show relatively normal brain metabolism, normal cortisol levels, and normal heart rate variability. This variability has led researchers to propose that insomnia might not be a single condition, but rather a collection of different subtypes with different underlying mechanisms. Based on current evidence, some researchers interpret this heterogeneity as suggesting that physiological hyperarousal is only one pathway to insomnia, while cognitive and perceptual factors may dominate in other cases. However, this remains an active area of research, and the field hasn't reached consensus on whether these represent truly distinct disorders or different manifestations of the same underlying problem. What we can say with certainty is that the subjective experience of insomnia, the distress, the daytime impairment, the struggle, is real and significant, regardless of what objective measurements show. Specific brain regions show altered activity patterns in insomnia. The ascending reticular activating system, located in the brainstem, is responsible for maintaining wakefulness. In people with insomnia, this system remains more active than it should during sleep attempts. The hypothalamus, which contains wake-promoting neurons that release orexin, shows increased activity. The prefrontal cortex, involved in executive control, attention, and self-awareness, fails to deactivate properly during sleep. This persistent prefrontal activation might explain why people with insomnia often report their minds continuing to work on problems, analyze situations, or simply remain vigilant when they should be drifting off. Studies using electroencephalography have found that people with insomnia show higher levels of beta wave activity, fast, high-frequency brain waves associated with active thinking and alertness during the sleep onset period and even during sleep itself. They also show increased temporal coupling between different brain regions, suggesting that their brains maintain higher levels of information processing when they should be quieting down. The neurotransmitter systems that regulate sleep and wake show dysregulation in chronic insomnia. GABA, the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter that promotes sleep, appears to function less effectively in people with insomnia. Studies using magnetic resonance spectroscopy have found lower levels of GABA in certain brain regions of insomnia patients compared to good sleepers. GABA works by inhibiting wake-promoting neurons in areas like the hypothalamus and brainstem. If GABAergic signaling is impaired, the brain's ability to suppress wakefulness and initiate sleep is compromised. Conversely, wake-promoting neurotransmitter systems may be overactive in insomnia. The norepinephrine system, which promotes arousal and vigilance, shows signs of hyperactivity. Studies have measured higher levels of norepinephrine and its metabolites in the urine of people with insomnia, suggesting increased sympathetic nervous system activity. The histamine system, which helps maintain wakefulness, may also be overactive. The orexin system, which stabilizes wakefulness and prevents inappropriate transitions into sleep, might contribute to the difficulty with falling asleep in insomnia, though research on this is still developing. A particularly intriguing finding relates to REM sleep, and this is where the story takes another unexpected turn, one that may help explain the paradox of being asleep yet feeling awake. In healthy sleep, REM is characterized by a profound silencing of the locus coeruleus, a small brain region that serves as the primary source of norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter associated with arousal and stress response. During REM sleep in good sleepers, the locus coeruleus essentially goes offline, creating what researchers call a norepinephrine timeout. This nightly break from norepinephrine is thought to be crucial for emotional processing, based on both animal studies and human neuroimaging research. When you experience something stressful or emotionally charged during the day, that experience gets reactivated during REM sleep, but with the norepinephrine system turned off. This dissociation between memory reactivation and stress response could allow the brain to process emotional content without the full physiological reaction. Many sleep researchers interpret this as a mechanism for emotional regulation, though the exact functional significance continues to be investigated. But in people with insomnia, recent research suggests something different may be happening. And this is where evidence meets hypothesis. Studies using brain imaging and physiological measurements have found evidence that the locus coeruleus appears to remain more active during REM sleep in insomnia patients compared to good sleepers. This finding has been reported by multiple research groups and appears to be consistent, though the field is still working to understand its implications. If the locus coeruleus doesn't fully quiet during REM sleep in insomnia, and this is now moving into theoretical interpretation, it could create several effects. First, it might prevent the deep, restorative quality of REM sleep, even when REM is objectively occurring. The brain would be in REM according to EEG patterns, but the persistent norepinephrine signaling could maintain a subjective sense of wakefulness or light sleep. This could explain part of our opening paradox: being asleep on measurements but experiencing wakefulness. Second, based on what we know about how norepinephrine modulates emotional memory, this restless REM sleep might interfere with emotional processing. If this hypothesis is correct, and it remains a hypothesis requiring more research, it could explain why insomnia so strongly predicts the development of depression and anxiety disorders. Emotional distress could accumulate over time when the nightly processing system isn't functioning optimally. This REM-based model offers an elegant theoretical framework, but we must be clear about what's established fact versus emerging theory. The facts. Good sleepers show pronounced locus coeruleus silencing during REM. People with insomnia show less complete silencing. Insomnia strongly predicts mental health disorders. The theory: these observations are causally linked, with restless REM sleep preventing emotional processing. This theory is plausible and consistent with current evidence but hasn't been definitively proven. The research continues. What we can say with certainty is that something about the neurobiological state during sleep is different in chronic insomnia, creating both the objective features researchers measure and the subjective experience of poor sleep that sufferers report. And understanding this difference has proven crucial for developing effective treatments. The stress system shows chronic activation in insomnia. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, is your body's central stress response system. When activated, it releases corticotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, which triggers the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, which in turn stimulates the adrenal glands to release cortisol. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, and it has wake-promoting effects. Normally, cortisol levels follow a circadian pattern, peaking in the early morning to help you wake up and declining in the evening to facilitate sleep. In people with chronic insomnia, particularly those with objectively short sleep duration, studies have found elevated levels of cortisol throughout the 24-hour period. They have higher nighttime cortisol levels, which can interfere with sleep initiation and maintenance. They show increased cortisol and adrenocorticotropic hormone secretion in response to stress. This chronic hypercortisolemia, excess cortisol, can have widespread effects on the body, contributing not just to sleep problems, but also to cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, immune dysfunction, and other health issues. The autonomic nervous system, which regulates involuntary bodily functions, also shows dysregulation in insomnia. The autonomic nervous system has two branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which activates the fight-or-flight response, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes rest and recovery. These two branches normally work in balance, with the sympathetic system dominating during waking hours and the parasympathetic system becoming more active during sleep. In people with insomnia, studies have found evidence of increased sympathetic activity and decreased parasympathetic activity. Their heart rate variability, a measure of the variation in time between heartbeats, shows patterns consistent with sympathetic dominance. Their nighttime blood pressure doesn't dip as much as it should. Normally, blood pressure drops by about 10 to 20% during sleep, a phenomenon called nocturnal dipping. People with insomnia, particularly those with short sleep duration, often show reduced or absent nocturnal dipping, which is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Functional neuroimaging studies have revealed that the brain's salience network, a network of regions involved in detecting and responding to personally relevant stimuli, shows altered connectivity in insomnia. This network includes the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, regions involved in emotional processing and interoception, awareness of internal bodily states. In insomnia, the salience network appears to be hyperactive and shows increased coupling with arousal-promoting brain regions like the locus coeruleus. This might mean that people with insomnia are more vigilant to potential threats, more reactive to stimuli, and more aware of bodily sensations that could interfere with sleep. An emerging model proposes that insomnia involves a flattened energy landscape in the brain. Using network control theory, a mathematical framework that models how brain networks transition between different states, researchers have found that people with chronic insomnia require less energy to transition between brain states compared to good sleepers. This might sound counterintuitive. Wouldn't difficulty sleeping mean it's harder to transition into sleep states? But the flattened energy landscape suggests that their brains are less stable, more prone to spontaneous transitions. It's as if their brain state is less sticky, making it easier to pop out of sleep or harder to sink deeply into it. Genetic factors likely play a role in vulnerability to insomnia. Twin studies have shown that insomnia has a familial component, with higher concordance rates in identical twins compared to fraternal twins. Genome-wide association studies have identified several genes associated with insomnia risk, including genes involved in circadian regulation, neuronal communication, and stress response. However, genetics doesn't determine insomnia on its own. Rather, genetic factors create a vulnerability that interacts with environmental stresses, psychological factors, and learned behaviors to produce the disorder. It's important to note that the hyperarousal model, while well supported, doesn't explain every case of insomnia. Not everyone with insomnia shows objective markers of hyperarousal. Some people with insomnia appear to have relatively normal physiology, but perceive their sleep as inadequate. This paradoxical insomnia, mentioned earlier, might involve different mechanisms, perhaps related more to heightened cognitive emotional arousal or altered sleep state perception than to physiological hyperarousal. The neuroscience of insomnia reveals a picture of a brain that's stuck in a state of alertness, unable to fully disengage from wakefulness. Multiple systems, neurotransmitter systems, the stress response, autonomic regulation, brain network dynamics, all show patterns consistent with hyperarousal. This chronic overactivation doesn't just make it hard to fall asleep at night, it has ripple effects throughout the body and mind, setting the stage for the numerous health consequences associated with chronic insomnia. But before we explore those consequences, we need to understand how insomnia develops and persists from a psychological perspective. The psychology of insomnia. How thoughts perpetuate sleeplessness while. Neuroscience reveals what's happening in the brain during insomnia. Psychology helps us understand how insomnia develops and, crucially, why it persists long after the initial trigger has resolved. And here's where we encounter another paradox that changes everything about how we treat insomnia. In the 1980s, psychologist Arthur Spielman was studying patients with chronic insomnia and noticed something puzzling. Many of his patients could clearly identify what had initially caused their insomnia: a divorce, a job loss, a serious illness, a death in the family. These precipitating events made perfect sense as triggers for sleep disruption. But here's what didn't make sense. The precipitating event had often occurred months or even years earlier. The person had adjusted to the life change. The acute stress had resolved. Yet the insomnia persisted with the same intensity. This observation led Spielman to propose what would become the most influential psychological model of chronic insomnia, the three-factor model. And this model contains a revelation that most people with insomnia never realize. The thing that started your insomnia is almost certainly not the thing that's keeping it going. The model works like this. Predisposing factors are characteristics that make a person vulnerable to developing insomnia. These might include genetic predisposition, anxious temperament, hyperarousal tendencies, or a family history of sleep problems. Think of predisposing factors as kindling, dry wood that's ready to catch fire, but not yet burning. Precipitating factors are acute stressors or events that trigger the onset of insomnia. These are the spark that ignites the kindling. Common precipitating factors include major life events like divorce, job loss, death of a loved one, serious illness, or financial crisis. But here's the crucial insight that changes everything. Most people who experience acute insomnia in response to a stressor will return to normal sleep once the stressor resolves or they adapt to it. The insomnia is temporary. What transforms acute insomnia into chronic insomnia, what keeps the fire burning long after the original spark is gone, is the third category: perpetuating factors. Perpetuating factors are behaviors, thoughts, and habits that develop in response to poor sleep and end up maintaining the insomnia indefinitely. This is the plot twist that most people with chronic insomnia never see coming. The very things you do to try to fix your sleep problem are often the things keeping it on. What are these perpetuating factors? One of the most common is sleep extension. When you're not sleeping well, a natural response is to spend more time in bed, hoping to catch up on lost sleep. You might go to bed earlier, sleep in later, or take naps during the day. This seems logical, but it often backfires. Spending excessive time in bed reduces sleep pressure, the homeostatic drive to sleep that builds during wakefulness. It also creates opportunities for your brain to associate the bed with wakefulness rather than sleep. Another perpetuating factor is irregular sleep schedules. In an attempt to accommodate their poor sleep, people with insomnia might go to bed at different times each night, depending on how tired they feel, or wake at different times each morning. This irregularity disrupts circadian rhythms, making it harder for the body to develop a consistent sleep-wake pattern. Behavioral conditioning plays a crucial role in perpetuating insomnia. Classical conditioning occurs when two stimuli become associated through repeated pairing. Normally, the bed and bedroom become conditioned cues for sleep. You get into bed, and your brain automatically begins the process of falling asleep because it's learned that bed means sleep. But if you spend lots of time lying awake in bed, worrying, problem-solving, checking your phone, watching television, the bed can become conditioned instead, as a cue for wakefulness and arousal. You get into bed, and instead of feeling sleepy, you feel alert and anxious. Maladaptive sleep-related behaviors accumulate over time. People with insomnia might start engaging in behaviors designed to help them sleep, but that actually interfere with sleep. They might consume alcohol before bed. Alcohol might help you fall asleep initially, but disrupts sleep later in the night. They might drink coffee late in the day to combat daytime fatigue, but the caffeine interferes with nighttime sleep. They might nap during the day to catch up on sleep, but this reduces nighttime sleep pressure. They might use their bed for activities other than sleep, reading, working, watching movies, which weakens the association between bed and sleep. But perhaps the most powerful perpetuating factor is cognitive. People with chronic insomnia develop dysfunctional beliefs and attitudes about sleep. These might include unrealistic expectations about how much sleep they need, catastrophic interpretations of the consequences of poor sleep, or misattributions about the causes of their daytime impairments. Common dysfunctional beliefs include, "I need at least 8 hours of sleep every night to function properly. If I don't get enough sleep tonight, tomorrow will be a complete disaster. My insomnia is causing irreparable damage to my health. I have no control over my sleep. I must make up for lost sleep by sleeping in or napping." These beliefs aren't necessarily completely false, but they're exaggerated and unhelpful. They create anxiety around sleep, and that anxiety interferes with the ability to sleep. You lie in bed thinking, "I have to fall asleep or tomorrow will be terrible," and that very thought generates arousal that prevents sleep. Worry and rumination are central to chronic insomnia. People with insomnia worry about their sleep. Will I be able to fall asleep tonight? What if I'm awake all night again? How will I function tomorrow? They worry about the consequences of poor sleep. I'll be too tired to do well at work. I might make a mistake. My health will deteriorate. They may also worry about problems unrelated to sleep, but the quiet darkness of the bedroom provides an ideal environment for worrying about anything and everything. These racing thoughts and worries generate cognitive arousal that's incompatible with sleep. Attention bias also plays a role. People with chronic insomnia become hypervigilant about sleep-related cues and threats. They constantly monitor their sleep, checking the clock throughout the night, tracking how long they've been awake, calculating how much sleep they might get if they fall asleep right now. They monitor their body for signs that sleep might be coming or that sleep is eluding them. This monitoring itself interferes with sleep. Sleep is a passive process. You can't force it to happen. The more you try to make yourself sleep, the more elusive it becomes. This attentional focus on sleep extends into the daytime. People with insomnia selectively attend to information about the negative effects of poor sleep. They notice every time they make a small mistake or forget something, attributing it to lack of sleep. They focus on their fatigue while ignoring their moments of adequate functioning. This creates a distorted perception that amplifies the impact of insomnia on their lives. Safety behaviors are another cognitive behavioral perpetuating factor. These are things people do to protect themselves from the feared consequences of insomnia. They might cancel social plans because they're too tired, avoid challenging tasks because they don't think they can perform well without adequate sleep, or delegate responsibilities to others. While understandable, these behaviors prevent the person from discovering that they can actually function reasonably well even after a poor night's sleep. The safety behaviors maintain the catastrophic beliefs about the consequences of insomnia. Performance anxiety develops around sleep itself. Sleep becomes a performance that the person fears they'll fail at. Each night becomes a test. Will I be able to sleep tonight? This performance pressure is antithetical to sleep, which requires letting go of conscious control. It's similar to trying too hard to remember someone's name. The harder you try, the more the memory seems to slip away. The role of emotions in perpetuating insomnia cannot be overstated. Anxiety, depression, and anger can all interfere with sleep, and poor sleep can exacerbate these emotions, creating a bidirectional relationship. Research has shown that insomnia is a significant risk factor for the development of anxiety disorders and depression. It's not just that anxious or depressed people sleep poorly. Poor sleep actually increases the risk of developing these conditions. The failure to adequately process emotions during REM sleep, as discussed earlier, might be one mechanism underlying this relationship. In summary, the psychology of chronic insomnia reveals how a temporary sleep problem can become entrenched. A person who is predisposed to insomnia experiences a precipitating stressor that disrupts their sleep. They respond with behaviors and thoughts that seem reasonable, spending more time in bed, worrying about their sleep, monitoring their symptoms. But these responses inadvertently perpetuate the problem. The insomnia takes on a life of its own, persisting even after the original trigger is long gone. Understanding this process is crucial because it points directly to effective treatment strategies, which we'll explore later. But first, we need to understand the full scope of what chronic insomnia does to the body and mind. The cascade of consequences, how insomnia affects body and mind. Chronic insomnia isn't just unpleasant. It's not merely a quality of life issue. Research over the past 2 decades has revealed that chronic insomnia, particularly when accompanied by objectively short sleep duration, is a significant risk factor for numerous serious health conditions. The consequences of insomnia ripple outward, affecting nearly every system in the body and every domain of functioning. But before we dive into these consequences, here's another twist in the insomnia story, one that has profound implications for treatment. Not all insomnia is created equal. In the mid-2000s, researcher Alexandros Vagontsas and his colleagues made a discovery that would split the world of insomnia research. They took a large group of people with chronic insomnia and did something simple but revealing. They measured their actual sleep duration objectively using polysomnography, then divided them into 2 groups. One group reported severe insomnia and also showed objectively short sleep duration, less than 6 hours per night. The other group reported equally severe insomnia, but showed normal sleep duration on objective measurements, 6 hours or more. When the researchers followed these groups over time and measured various health outcomes, they found something remarkable. The 2 groups looked very different. The insomnia with short sleep duration group showed activation of the stress system, elevated cortisol levels, and increased risk of hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. The insomnia with normal sleep duration group didn't show these physiological markers or the same degree of physical health risk. Both groups suffered psychologically. Both reported daytime impairment. Both struggled with their sleep. But only one group was on a path toward serious physical illness. This suggests that insomnia might actually be 2 distinct conditions masquerading as one, or at minimum, that the mechanisms and health implications differ dramatically depending on whether objective short sleep is present. This discovery has important implications. It means that the health consequences we're about to discuss apply most strongly to insomnia accompanied by objectively short sleep. It also means that treatment might need to be tailored differently for different types of insomnia. And it reminds us that even when symptoms look the same on the surface, the underlying biology can be fundamentally different. Now, with that crucial context in mind, let's explore what chronic insomnia can do to the body. Let's start with cardiovascular health, where the evidence is particularly striking. Multiple large-scale epidemiological studies have demonstrated that chronic insomnia is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease. People with insomnia have approximately 45% higher odds of developing or dying from cardiovascular disease compared to good sleepers. And remember, this risk is particularly concentrated in those with objective short sleep duration. Specific cardiovascular outcomes linked to insomnia include hypertension, coronary heart disease, heart failure, and stroke. The mechanisms underlying these associations are multifaceted. Chronic insomnia activates the sympathetic nervous system, increasing heart rate and blood pressure. The elevated cortisol levels found in insomnia can promote the development of hypertension and atherosclerosis. The inflammatory response is upregulated in insomnia, with studies finding elevated levels of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Chronic inflammation contributes to the development of cardiovascular disease. The reduced nocturnal blood pressure dipping observed in insomnia is particularly concerning. Normally, blood pressure drops by 10 to 20% during sleep, giving the cardiovascular system a period of relative rest. People with insomnia often show blunted or absent dipping, meaning their cardiovascular system never gets a break. Non-dipping is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular events, including heart attack and stroke, as well as with damage to target organs like the heart, kidneys, and blood vessels. Insomnia is also associated with metabolic dysfunction. Studies have found links between chronic insomnia and increased risk of type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and obesity. The mechanisms are complex and interconnected. Sleep deprivation affects glucose metabolism, reducing insulin sensitivity and impairing the body's ability to regulate blood sugar levels. Even a single night of poor sleep can create a temporary pre-diabetic state in a healthy person. Sleep also affects appetite-regulating hormones. Sleep deprivation decreases levels of leptin, a hormone that signals satiety, and increases levels of ghrelin, a hormone that signals hunger. This hormonal imbalance can lead to increased appetite and caloric intake, particularly a preference for high-calorie, high-carbohydrate foods. Over time, this can contribute to weight gain and obesity. The relationship between insomnia and metabolic health appears to be bidirectional. Insomnia increases the risk of developing metabolic disorders, but having metabolic disorders also worsens sleep. People with diabetes, for example, often have disrupted sleep due to symptoms like frequent urination, peripheral neuropathy causing uncomfortable sensations in the legs, or blood sugar fluctuations affecting sleep quality. Immune function is compromised by chronic insomnia. Sleep plays a crucial role in the proper functioning of the immune system. During sleep, the body produces cytokines, proteins that help fight infection and inflammation. Sleep deprivation reduces the production of protective cytokines and antibodies, making the body more susceptible to infections. Studies have shown that people who don't get adequate sleep are more likely to get sick after being exposed to a virus. Chronic insomnia might also affect the body's ability to fight cancer, though this area of research is still developing. The impact of insomnia on mental health is profound and well documented. Insomnia is one of the strongest risk factors for the development of major depressive disorder. People with chronic insomnia have twice the risk of developing depression compared to good sleepers. The relationship is complex and bidirectional. Insomnia can trigger depression, depression can cause insomnia, and each condition exacerbates the other. Treating insomnia can reduce depressive symptoms, and treating depression can improve sleep, but often both conditions require independent attention. Insomnia is also associated with increased risk of anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and substance use disorders. The mechanisms likely involve the failure of REM sleep to adequately process emotional experiences, the chronic stress and hyperarousal associated with insomnia, and the accumulation of negative thoughts and maladaptive behaviors. Moreover, insomnia increases the risk of suicidal ideation and completed suicide, even when controlling for depression and other mental health conditions. Cognitive functioning is impaired by chronic insomnia, though the nature and extent of impairment has been debated. People with insomnia consistently report difficulties with concentration, memory, and attention. However, objective neuropsychological testing has produced mixed results, with some studies showing impairments and others finding normal performance. This discrepancy might be explained by several factors. First, people with insomnia might exert more mental effort to maintain performance, succeeding in the short term, but at the cost of increased fatigue. Second, the type of cognitive task matters. Insomnia appears to particularly affect tasks requiring sustained attention, complex decision-making, and emotional processing. Third, there's likely heterogeneity in insomnia, with some individuals showing objective cognitive deficits and others not. Recent research suggests that chronic insomnia may be associated with increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia in later life. The mechanisms might involve the reduced clearance of metabolic waste products from the brain during inadequate sleep. During deep sleep, the glymphatic system, a waste clearance system in the brain, operates at high efficiency, removing potentially neurotoxic proteins, including amyloid beta, which accumulates in Alzheimer's disease. Chronic sleep deprivation might interfere with this clearance process, allowing toxic proteins to accumulate. Quality of life is significantly impacted by chronic insomnia. People with insomnia report lower levels of physical and mental well-being, reduced life satisfaction, and impairment across multiple domains, including work, social relationships, and leisure activities. The chronic fatigue, daytime sleepiness, mood disturbances, and cognitive difficulties associated with insomnia interfere with the ability to fully engage in and enjoy life. Workplace productivity suffers. People with insomnia have higher rates of absenteeism, missing work, and presenteeism, being at work but functioning suboptimally. They're more likely to make errors, have workplace accidents, and experience conflicts with co-workers. The economic costs of insomnia are enormous, estimated in the tens of billions of dollars annually in the United States alone when considering healthcare costs, lost productivity, and accidents. Driving safety is compromised. Sleep deprivation impairs reaction time, vigilance, and decision-making, similar to alcohol intoxication. People with chronic insomnia are at increased risk of motor vehicle accidents. They may experience microsleeps, brief episodes of sleep lasting just a few seconds, while driving, which can be catastrophic at highway speeds. Interpersonal relationships can be strained by insomnia. The irritability, mood changes, and reduced energy associated with insomnia can lead to conflicts with partners, family members, and friends. Partners may be disturbed by the person's sleep difficulties, leading to relationship stress. Social activities may be curtailed because of fatigue or the person's focus on managing their sleep. The effects of insomnia can create a vicious cycle. Poor sleep leads to daytime impairments, which cause stress and distress, which further disrupt sleep. Health problems resulting from insomnia can create additional stress and further compromise sleep. Mental health deteriorates, which worsens sleep. The person becomes increasingly focused on their sleep problem, which paradoxically makes it harder to sleep. It's important to note that not all people with insomnia experience all of these consequences, and the severity of consequences varies. The distinction between insomnia with and without objective short sleep duration appears to be important. People with insomnia who also have objectively measured short sleep duration seem to be at higher risk for many of these adverse health outcomes, particularly cardiovascular and metabolic consequences. Those with insomnia but normal sleep duration, paradoxical insomnia, may experience more psychological and quality of life impacts without the same degree of physical health risk. The picture that emerges is clear. chronic insomnia is not a benign condition. It's a significant public health problem with serious consequences for physical health, mental health, cognitive functioning, safety, quality of life, and economic productivity. Understanding the full scope of these consequences underscores the importance of accurately diagnosing and effectively treating insomnia. So how do clinicians assess and diagnose this complex condition? Assessing and diagnosing insomnia. Understanding the sleep problem. When someone seeks help for sleep problems, the evaluation process involves gathering detailed information about their sleep patterns, symptoms, medical and psychiatric history, and daytime functioning. The goal is not just to determine whether insomnia is present, but to understand the nature of the sleep problem, identify contributing factors, and rule out other sleep disorders or medical conditions that might be causing or exacerbating the insomnia. The cornerstone of insomnia assessment is the clinical interview. A skilled clinician will ask about the nature of the sleep difficulty. Is it primarily difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking too early? How long has the problem been present? How many nights per week does it occur? What are the consequences during the day? Fatigue, sleepiness, mood changes, cognitive difficulties? The clinician will explore the sleep schedule in detail. What time does the person go to bed? What time do they turn off the lights and try to sleep? How long does it take to fall asleep? How many times do they wake during the night? How long are they awake when they wake up? What time do they wake in the morning? What time do they get out of bed? Do they nap during the day? This detailed mapping of the 24-hour sleep-wake pattern helps identify patterns that might perpetuate insomnia. The sleep environment and sleep habits are important to assess. What is the bedroom like? Temperature, noise level, light, comfort? What does the person do in bed besides sleep? Do they watch television, use their phone, read, work? What is their pre-sleep routine? Do they have a regular wind-down period, or do they go directly from active tasks to bed? Do they consume caffeine, alcohol, or nicotine? And if so, how much and when? A careful medical history is essential. Many medical conditions can disrupt sleep. Chronic pain from arthritis, fibromyalgia, or back problems can make it difficult to get comfortable. Cardiovascular disease can cause symptoms like chest pain or shortness of breath that wake people up. Gastrointestinal problems like reflux can cause discomfort that interferes with sleep. Endocrine disorders like hypothyroidism can cause insomnia. Neurological conditions like Parkinson's disease or restless leg syndrome can disrupt sleep. Medications used to treat these and other conditions can also affect sleep, either by having stimulating effects or by causing side effects that interfere with sleep. Psychiatric assessment is equally important. As we've discussed, insomnia is strongly associated with mood and anxiety disorders. The clinician will screen for symptoms of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and substance use disorders. It's important to understand the temporal relationship between the insomnia and any psychiatric symptoms. Did the insomnia precede the development of depression, or did the insomnia start after depression was already present? Does the person use alcohol or other substances as sleep aids? Other sleep disorders must be considered and ruled out. Obstructive sleep apnea, characterized by repeated pauses in breathing during sleep, is common and often causes symptoms that can be confused with insomnia, including frequent nighttime awakenings and daytime fatigue. Restless legs syndrome, which causes uncomfortable sensations in the legs and an irresistible urge to move them, typically worsens in the evening and can delay sleep onset. Circadian rhythm disorders, where the person's internal clock is misaligned with their desired or required sleep-wake schedule, can also present with insomnia symptoms. Differentiating these conditions from insomnia disorder is crucial because they require different treatments. Sleep diaries are one of the most valuable tools in assessing insomnia. The person keeps a daily log for 1 to 2 weeks, recording what time they went to bed, how long they think it took to fall asleep, how many times they woke during the night, what time they woke in the morning, what time they got out of bed, whether they napped, and how they felt during the day. This prospective recording of sleep patterns often reveals information that the person can't accurately recall when asked about their typical sleep in an interview. It might show, for example, that sleep duration is actually more variable than the person thought, or that weekday and weekend sleep patterns differ dramatically, or that certain behaviors consistently precede good or poor nights. Questionnaires can provide useful information. The Insomnia Severity Index is a brief 7-item questionnaire that assesses the severity of insomnia symptoms and their impact on daytime functioning. The Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index is a longer questionnaire that assesses multiple aspects of sleep quality. These tools help quantify the severity of the problem and can be used to track changes over time. In some cases, objective sleep measurement is warranted. Polysomnography is a comprehensive sleep study typically conducted in a sleep laboratory. The person sleeps overnight while multiple physiological parameters are recorded continuously. Brain activity via EEG, eye movements via electrooculography, muscle activity via electromyography, heart rate and rhythm via electrocardiography, breathing patterns, oxygen saturation, and leg movements. Polysomnography can identify other sleep disorders, like sleep apnea or periodic limb movement disorder. However, for uncomplicated insomnia without suspicion of another sleep disorder, polysomnography is often not necessary. Actigraphy is another objective measurement tool. An actigraph is a small device, usually worn on the wrist like a watch, that measures movement. Because people are generally still when asleep and move when awake, actigraphy can estimate sleep-wake patterns over multiple nights in the person's natural environment. It's less comprehensive than polysomnography, but more practical for extended monitoring. Actigraphy can be particularly useful in assessing circadian rhythm disorders or providing objective data when there's a discrepancy between subjective reports and the clinical picture. The diagnostic process also involves determining whether the insomnia is chronic, lasting 3 months or more and occurring at least 3 nights per week, or acute, lasting less than 3 months. As mentioned earlier, acute insomnia is often self-limiting and may not require specific treatment beyond sleep hygiene education and reassurance. Chronic insomnia, however, typically warrants active intervention. One challenge in diagnosis is that there's no objective test that definitively identifies insomnia. The diagnosis is based primarily on the person's subjective report of difficulty sleeping, the presence of adequate opportunity to sleep, and the report of daytime consequences. This reliance on subjective experience is appropriate given that insomnia is partly defined by the person's dissatisfaction with their sleep, but it can complicate research and assessment. Another challenge is comorbidity. As we've discussed, insomnia frequently occurs alongside other medical and psychiatric conditions. The current diagnostic approach doesn't require determining whether the insomnia is primary or secondary. It's simply insomnia disorder if it meets criteria. However, understanding the relationship between insomnia and comorbid conditions is important for treatment planning. If someone has both insomnia and depression, for example, both conditions should be addressed. Once a thorough assessment is complete and insomnia disorder is diagnosed, the focus shifts to treatment. And this is where the modern understanding of insomnia really shines, because we now have highly effective, evidence-based treatments that target the psychological and behavioral factors perpetuating insomnia. Treating insomnia, cognitive behavioral approaches, and a revolution in sleep medicine. For decades, the primary treatment for insomnia was medication. Benzodiazepines and other sedative hypnotic drugs were widely prescribed to help people fall asleep. While these medications can be effective in the short term, they come with significant limitations. Effects including daytime drowsiness and cognitive impairment, risk of dependence and withdrawal, diminishing effectiveness over time, and the problem that insomnia typically returns when the medication is stopped. By the 1980s, millions of people were trapped in a cycle of nightly medication use, getting chemically induced sleep that didn't feel quite natural and didn't solve the underlying problem. Then came a paradigm shift that would transform sleep medicine. It started with a simple question. If insomnia is perpetuated by specific behaviors and thought patterns, what would happen if we directly targeted those perpetuating factors instead of just trying to induce sleep with drugs? Beginning in the 1970s and 1980s, psychologists and sleep researchers began developing and testing behavioral and cognitive interventions for insomnia. Over time, these techniques were refined and combined into a structured treatment approach called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. And here's the remarkable thing. It worked. Not just a little bit. It worked as well as or better than medication for most people. And unlike medication, the benefits persisted after treatment ended. The evidence became so overwhelming that in 2016, the American College of Physicians issued a clinical practice guideline stating that CBTI should be the first-line treatment for chronic insomnia in adults. This was a revolutionary recommendation. It meant that doctors should prescribe therapy, not pills, as the initial treatment for insomnia. This recommendation was based on dozens of randomized controlled trials showing that CBTI produces meaningful, lasting improvements in sleep. But here's what makes CBTI truly fascinating. It works by doing things that sound completely counterintuitive, even cruel. One of the core components involves deliberately restricting the amount of time you're allowed to spend in bed, essentially creating mild sleep deprivation on purpose. Another component requires you to get out of bed whenever you can't sleep, even if it's 2 a.m. and you have work in the morning. These instructions seem almost designed to make insomnia worse, not better. Yet they work, and understanding why they work requires understanding the psychology of perpetuating factors we discussed earlier. CBTI succeeds because it systematically dismantles the behavioral and cognitive patterns that keep insomnia alive. CBTI is typically delivered in 6 to 8 sessions, either individually or in small groups, though brief versions of CBTI have also been developed and shown to be effective. The treatment is highly structured and includes several core components, each targeting specific perpetuating factors of insomnia. The first component is sleep education and sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene refers to practices and environmental factors that promote good sleep. People with insomnia often have poor sleep hygiene, though it's important to note that simply providing sleep hygiene education is usually not sufficient to treat chronic insomnia. The behavioral and cognitive components are essential. Nevertheless, optimizing sleep hygiene creates conditions conducive to sleep. Sleep hygiene recommendations include: maintain a regular sleep-wake schedule, going to bed and waking up at approximately the same time every day, including weekends. Create a comfortable sleep environment that's dark, quiet, and cool. Use blackout curtains, earplugs, or a white noise machine if needed. Reserve the bed and bedroom for sleep and intimate relations only. Don't work, watch television, or use electronic devices in bed. Limit exposure to bright light in the evening, particularly blue light from screens. Consider using blue light blocking glasses or software that adjusts screen color temperature in the evening. Get regular exposure to bright light during the day, especially in the morning, to help regulate circadian rhythms. Avoid caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol within several hours of bedtime. Caffeine has a half-life of about 5 hours, meaning that even caffeine consumed in the afternoon can affect nighttime sleep. Avoid large meals or vigorous exercise close to bedtime, though regular exercise during the day is beneficial for sleep. Develop a relaxing pre-sleep routine to signal to the body that it's time to wind down. The second component of CBTI is stimulus control therapy. This intervention directly addresses the conditioned association between the bed and wakefulness. The goal is to re-establish the bed as a strong cue for sleep. The instructions are straightforward but require discipline. Go to bed only when sleepy, not just tired. If you're unable to fall asleep within about 20 minutes, get out of bed and go to another room. Engage in a quiet, relaxing activity until you feel sleepy, then return to bed. If you're still unable to fall asleep after another 20 minutes, repeat the process. Get out of bed at the same time every morning, regardless of how much sleep you got. Avoid napping during the day. Use the bed and bedroom only for sleep and intimacy. Remove televisions, computers, and work materials from the bedroom. These instructions can be challenging to follow, especially in the early stages of treatment when sleep is already poor. Getting out of bed when you can't sleep feels counterintuitive. You want to stay in bed in hopes that sleep will eventually come. But research consistently shows that stimulus control is one of the most effective components of CBTI. It works by strengthening the association between bed and sleep, while weakening the association between bed and wakefulness. The third component is sleep restriction therapy, which addresses the perpetuating factor of sleep extension. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive part of CBTI. Instead of spending more time in bed to try to get more sleep, you actually restrict your time in bed to match your actual sleep duration. This increases sleep drive, homeostatic sleep pressure, and consolidates sleep, reducing fragmentation. Here's how it works. Using data from the sleep diary, the therapist calculates the person's average total sleep time over the past week. Let's say it's 5.5 hours. The therapist then prescribes a sleep window of 5.5 hours. If the person wants to wake up at 6 a.m., they're not allowed to go to bed before 12:30 a.m. This means eliminating any napping and staying up later than they might feel comfortable with initially. The rationale is that mild sleep deprivation increases sleep drive, making it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. As sleep efficiency, the percentage of time in bed spent actually sleeping, improves, the sleep window can be gradually expanded by 15 to 30 minutes. The goal is to achieve consolidated sleep, falling asleep quickly, staying asleep through the night, rather than fragmented, low-quality sleep spread across many hours in bed. Sleep restriction therapy requires careful implementation and monitoring. The prescribed time in bed should never be less than 5 hours, even if the person reports sleeping fewer hours than that, because extreme sleep restriction could be dangerous. People should be cautioned about driving or operating heavy machinery during the initial weeks of sleep restriction, when daytime sleepiness might increase. The sleep window is adjusted based on sleep efficiency, which is calculated from the sleep diary. If sleep efficiency is high, typically defined as 85–90% or above, the sleep window is extended. If it's low, the window might be shortened further or kept the same. The fourth component of CBTI is cognitive therapy, which addresses the dysfunctional beliefs and maladaptive thought patterns that perpetuate insomnia. The therapist helps the person identify and challenge catastrophic thoughts about sleep and its consequences. For example, the belief, "If I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I'll be completely unable to function tomorrow," can be examined. The therapist might ask, "What's the evidence for and against this belief? Have there been times when you functioned reasonably well despite poor sleep? What alternative, more balanced thoughts might be more helpful?" Cognitive restructuring involves replacing catastrophic, rigid thoughts with more realistic, flexible ones. Instead of, "I must get 8 hours of sleep or tomorrow will be a disaster," the thought becomes, sleep is important. But I've coped with poor sleep before, and I can manage tomorrow even if tonight's sleep isn't perfect. This doesn't mean denying that poor sleep is difficult or unpleasant, but rather not catastrophizing about it in ways that generate anxiety and further interfere with sleep. The cognitive therapy component also addresses worrying and rumination. People are taught worry management techniques like scheduling a worry time earlier in the day to address concerns, rather than letting them flood their mind at bedtime. They learn to recognize when they're engaged in unproductive worry and to redirect their attention. They practice acceptance of uncertainty rather than trying to control every aspect of their sleep. The fifth component of CBTI often includes relaxation training. Various relaxation techniques can help reduce physiological arousal and promote a state conducive to sleep. These might include progressive muscle relaxation, where you systematically tense and then relax different muscle groups, diaphragmatic breathing, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, or guided imagery, where you visualize peaceful, calming scenes. Mindfulness meditation has also been incorporated into some versions of CBTI, teaching people to observe their thoughts and physical sensations without judgment or engagement. Throughout treatment, the therapist works to garner the person's buy-in to the treatment approach. This is crucial because many components of CBTI, particularly sleep restriction and stimulus control, are difficult and require sustained effort. The therapist explains the rationale for each technique, connects it to the person's specific symptoms and maintaining factors, and helps problem-solve obstacles to implementation. The effectiveness of CBTI has been demonstrated across numerous randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses. A comprehensive 2010 meta-analysis of 20 randomized controlled studies found that CBTI, on average, reduces the time it takes to fall asleep by about 19 minutes, reduces time awake after sleep onset by about 26 minutes, and increases total sleep time by about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, those numbers might not sound dramatic at first glance. You might think, only 19 minutes faster to fall asleep? Is that worth the effort? But here's what those statistics don't capture. The improvements in sleep quality and daytime functioning are often transformative. People report feeling more rested, more in control, less anxious about sleep. The fragmented, anxiety-filled sleep becomes more consolidated and refreshing. And crucially, these changes are sustained over time, often improving even further after treatment ends. This contrasts sharply with medication. Sleep medications can reduce sleep onset by 30 minutes or more, which sounds better than CBTI's 19 minutes, but medication typically only works while you're taking it. Stop the pills, and insomnia returns within days or weeks for most people. CBTI, by contrast, teaches skills that become more automatic over time. Studies with follow-up periods of months to years show that improvements are maintained and often continue to increase. It's the difference between renting and owning. Medication rents you temporary relief, while CBTI helps you own your sleep. CBTI is effective for both primary insomnia and insomnia that occurs alongside other conditions like depression, chronic pain, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Works in different age groups, including older adults, and can be delivered in various formats, including individual therapy, group therapy, self-help books, and internet-based programs. Digital CBTI, DCBTI, has emerged as a scalable way to deliver treatment, with studies showing effectiveness comparable to face-to-face therapy for many people. One of the most significant advantages of CBTI is the absence of adverse effects. Unlike medications, CBTI doesn't cause daytime drowsiness, cognitive impairment, falls, or physical dependence. The main side effects are temporary, increased daytime sleepiness during the sleep restriction phase, and the effort and discipline required to implement the behavioral changes. Some people find the treatment demanding, and adherence can be challenging, but with support and encouragement, most people are able to complete treatment successfully. For people who are taking sleep medications, CBTI can facilitate medication tapering and discontinuation. Combining CBTI with a gradual reduction in medication dosage allows people to come off medications while maintaining improvements in sleep. This approach is more successful than attempting to discontinue medication without behavioral and cognitive support. Relapse prevention is typically addressed in the final sessions of CBTI. The therapist helps the person anticipate situations that might challenge their sleep, travel, illness, stress, and develop strategies for managing these situations. The person is encouraged to continue practicing the techniques they've learned, even after sleep has improved. They're reminded that occasional poor nights are normal and don't signal a return to chronic insomnia, as long as they don't revert to old habits like spending excessive time in bed or worrying catastrophically about their sleep. While CBTI is highly effective, it's not universally successful. Some people don't respond to treatment, and others have only partial improvement. For these individuals, additional or alternative approaches might be needed, including pharmacological treatment, which we'll discuss next. However, for the majority of people with chronic insomnia, CBTI offers a genuine solution, not just symptom management, a way to retrain the brain and body to sleep naturally. Pharmacological treatments, medications for sleep. Despite the strong evidence supporting CBTI as the first-line treatment for chronic insomnia, medication remains the most common intervention in clinical practice. There are several reasons for this. Access to trained CBTI therapists is limited. Many people are not aware that effective behavioral treatments exist. Medications offer a quick solution, which is appealing both to patients desperate for relief and to healthcare providers working within short appointment times. And for some people, medication is necessary, either because behavioral treatments haven't worked or as an adjunct to CBTI. Understanding the pharmacological options for insomnia requires understanding what these medications do and don't do. Most sleep medications work by enhancing GABAergic neurotransmission. They amplify the action of GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. By increasing inhibitory signaling, these medications suppress activity in wake-promoting brain regions, making it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. However, they don't address the underlying perpetuating factors of insomnia, which means that insomnia typically returns when the medication is discontinued. Benzodiazepines were among the first medications widely prescribed for insomnia. These drugs, which include temazepam, triazolam, and flurazepam, bind to GABA-A receptors in the brain, enhancing the effect of GABA. They're effective at inducing sleep, but they come with significant downsides. Benzodiazepines can cause next-day drowsiness, cognitive impairment, and increased risk of falls, particularly in older adults. They alter sleep architecture, suppressing deep sleep and REM sleep. Tolerance can develop, meaning that higher doses are needed over time to achieve the same effect. Physical dependence is common with long-term use, and withdrawal can be difficult, potentially causing rebound insomnia, anxiety, and, in severe cases, seizures. For these reasons, benzodiazepines are no longer recommended as first-line treatment for insomnia. The so-called Z drugs, zolpidem, zaleplon, ezopiclone, and zopiclone, were developed as alternatives to benzodiazepines. Like benzodiazepines, they enhance GABA activity, but they bind more selectively to certain subtypes of the GABA-A receptor, theoretically targeting the sedative effect, more specifically, while minimizing other effects like muscle relaxation and amnesia. Z drugs are effective for sleep onset and, in the case of esopicolone, sleep maintenance. They have somewhat better safety profiles than benzodiazepines, with less alteration of sleep architecture and potentially less risk of dependence, though these drugs are not without concerns. Common side effects of Z drugs include dizziness, headache, and daytime drowsiness. Rare but serious side effects include complex sleep-related behaviors, activities performed while not fully awake, such as sleepwalking, sleep driving, or sleep eating, which people typically don't remember afterwards. The US Food and Drug Administration has required boxed warnings about these behaviors on Z drug labels. The risk appears to be dose-dependent, occurring more often at higher doses. Like benzodiazepines, Z drugs carry some risk of physical dependence with long-term use, and rebound insomnia can occur upon discontinuation. Melatonin receptor agonists offer a different mechanism of action. Ramelteon and tasimelteon are synthetic drugs that mimic the action of melatonin, the hormone naturally produced by the pineal gland to signal darkness and promote sleep. These medications bind to melatonin receptors in the brain, particularly in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, helping to regulate circadian rhythms. They're primarily used for sleep-onset insomnia and are particularly appropriate when circadian rhythm disturbance is suspected. Melatonin receptor agonists have favorable safety profiles, with no evidence of physical dependence or significant withdrawal symptoms. However, their effectiveness is generally modest compared to GABAergic medications. Over-the-counter melatonin supplements are widely available and commonly used for sleep problems. The evidence for their effectiveness in treating chronic insomnia is mixed. Melatonin can help with circadian-related sleep problems, such as jet lag or shift work disorder, and may have some benefit for sleep-onset insomnia. The appropriate dose is unclear, with studies using doses ranging from 0.3 to 10 milligrams. Unlike prescription medications, melatonin supplements are not strictly regulated, so the actual content and purity can vary between brands. Generally, melatonin is considered safe with few side effects, though some people experience daytime drowsiness, headache, or dizziness. The newest class of medications for insomnia is the dual orexin receptor antagonists, or DORAs, and their development represents one of the most elegant examples of translational neuroscience, taking a basic discovery about brain function and turning it into a therapeutic tool. Remember when we discussed how orexin was discovered in 1998, and how researchers found that narcolepsy was caused by loss of orexin neurons? That discovery immediately suggested a question. If lack of orexin causes excessive sleep, what would happen if we blocked orexin in people who can't sleep? The drugs that emerged from this insight, suvorexant, approved in 2014, lemborexant, approved in 2019, and daridorexant, approved in 2022, work through a completely different mechanism than traditional sleep medications. Instead of enhancing inhibitory neurotransmission with GABA, they block the wake-promoting effects of orexin by antagonizing orexin receptors. The rationale is elegant. If hyperarousal is central to insomnia, and orexin promotes wakefulness and arousal, then blocking orexin should reduce hyperarousal and facilitate sleep. Clinical trials have shown that orexin receptor antagonists are effective for both sleep onset and sleep maintenance. They appear to preserve normal sleep architecture better than benzodiazepines or Z drugs, with proportional increases in both REM and NREM sleep, meaning they don't distort the natural balance of sleep stages the way older medications do. The most common side effect is daytime somnolence, but otherwise, these medications are generally well tolerated in clinical trials. Importantly, studies to date suggest that orexin receptor antagonists don't appear to cause physical dependence or withdrawal symptoms, making them potentially more suitable for longer-term use than benzodiazepines. However, several, important caveats deserve mention. These medications are considerably more expensive than generic Z-drugs or benzodiazepines, often costing more than $10 per pill without insurance, which limits their accessibility. Long-term safety data beyond 1 to 2 years remains limited, as these drugs are relatively new. And one theoretical concern remains. Given that narcolepsy is caused by loss of orexin neurons, could blocking orexin with medication cause narcolepsy-like symptoms? In clinical trials conducted so far, symptoms like cataplexy, the sudden loss of muscle tone triggered by emotion that characterizes narcolepsy, have not been observed with orexin antagonists. Sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, other hallmark symptoms of narcolepsy, have been reported rarely, typically at higher doses. Based on current evidence, the risk appears low, but post-marketing surveillance and longer-term studies continue to monitor for these potential effects. Some antidepressants with sedating properties are used off-label for insomnia. Trazodone, doxepin, mirtazapine, and amitriptyline are sometimes prescribed at low doses as sleep aids. These medications have various mechanisms of action, typically involving antagonism of histamine receptors or serotonin receptors, which can cause drowsiness. They're particularly appealing for people with insomnia and comorbid depression, potentially addressing both conditions. However, the evidence for their effectiveness in treating insomnia is less robust than for medications specifically developed for sleep. Side effects can include weight gain, dry mouth, constipation, and in the case of tricyclic antidepressants like amitriptyline, cardiovascular effects that make them inappropriate for older adults or people with heart conditions. Antihistamines like diphenhydramine and doxylamine are found in many over-the-counter sleep aids. They cause drowsiness by blocking histamine H1 receptors, which are involved in wakefulness. While they can help people fall asleep, they're not recommended for regular use. They can cause significant next-day grogginess, dry mouth, constipation, and urinary retention. Tolerance develops rapidly, meaning they become less effective over time. In older adults, antihistamines can cause cognitive impairment and confusion and are associated with increased risk of falls and dementia. Alcohol is often used as a sleep aid, but it's a poor choice. While alcohol can help you fall asleep more quickly, it disrupts sleep later in the night. Alcohol suppresses REM sleep in the first half of the night and causes rebound REM later, leading to fragmented, unrefreshing sleep. It can worsen sleep apnea. It's a depressant that can exacerbate depression. Regular use can lead to dependence, and mixing alcohol with sleep medications can be dangerous, potentially causing severe respiratory depression. When is medication appropriate for insomnia? Current guidelines suggest that pharmacological treatment should be considered when CBTI is not available, not acceptable to the patient, or has been tried without adequate response. The person is in acute crisis and immediate symptom relief is needed while behavioral treatment is initiated. Chronic insomnia is causing severe distress or functional impairment, and the person cannot engage in behavioral treatment until sleep is somewhat stabilized. The person has a clear preference for medication after being fully informed about both behavioral and pharmacological options. If medication is used, several principles should guide treatment. Use the lowest effective dose. Take medication intermittently rather than nightly if possible to reduce tolerance and dependence risk. Combine medication with CBTI when feasible, with the goal of eventually tapering off medication. Regularly reassess the need for continued medication. Be particularly cautious in older adults, in whom risks of falls, cognitive impairment, and drug interactions are higher. The ideal approach for many people with chronic insomnia is likely a combination of CBTI and, if needed, short-term medication use. CBTI addresses the psychological and behavioral factors maintaining insomnia and provides long-lasting benefits. Medication can provide more rapid symptom relief while behavioral changes are taking effect. Over time, as CBTI begins to work, medication can be gradually tapered and discontinued. Building better sleep, practical strategies, and sleep hygiene. Beyond formal CBTI and medication, there are numerous practical strategies that can support healthy sleep. These approaches might not be sufficient on their own to treat chronic insomnia, but they create conditions that make sleep more likely and support the effectiveness of other treatments. Sleep hygiene, as mentioned earlier, involves practices and environmental factors that promote sleep. Let's explore these in more detail. The sleep environment matters significantly. Your bedroom should be conducive to sleep, which typically means it should be dark, quiet, cool, and comfortable. Darkness signals to the brain that it's time for sleep. Even small amounts of light can suppress melatonin production. Consider using blackout curtains or an eye mask if your bedroom isn't adequately dark. Dim lights in the hour or two before bed to help your body transition toward sleep. Light exposure during the day is equally important. Getting bright light, particularly sunlight in the morning, helps synchronize your circadian rhythm and promotes alertness during the day. If you work indoors or live in a location with limited sunlight, consider using a light therapy box in the morning. Electronic devices emit blue light, which is particularly effective at suppressing melatonin. The content on these devices, emails, news, social media, can also be stimulating or stress-inducing. It's advisable to avoid screens for at least an hour before bed. If you must use devices in the evening, enable night mode settings that reduce blue light emission or use blue light blocking glasses. Noise can prevent you from falling asleep or wake you during the night. If you can't eliminate noise sources, consider using earplugs or a white noise machine. White noise works by masking irregular sounds that might otherwise wake you. Some people find other forms of constant, predictable sound, like a fan, rain sounds, or nature sounds, helpful. Temperature affects sleep quality. Most people sleep best in a relatively cool environment, typically between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Your body temperature naturally drops during sleep, and a cool room facilitates this process. However, preferences vary, so adjust to what feels comfortable for you. The mattress and pillows should support comfortable, pain-free sleep. What constitutes a comfortable mattress is highly individual. Some people prefer firm support, others prefer softer surfaces. If you regularly wake with back or neck pain, or if your mattress is old, typically more than 7 to 10 years, it might be time for a replacement. Diet and exercise influence sleep. Regular physical activity promotes deeper, more restorative sleep and can help reduce stress and anxiety. However, vigorous exercise close to bedtime can be stimulating and might interfere with sleep onset. Try to complete intense workouts at least a few hours before bed. Gentler activities like stretching or yoga can be done closer to bedtime and may actually help relaxation. What and when you eat matters. Large, heavy meals close to bedtime can cause discomfort and indigestion that interfere with sleep. On the other hand, going to bed very hungry can also make it hard to sleep. A light snack might be appropriate if you're hungry before bed. Some foods naturally contain small amounts of sleep-promoting compounds. Tryptophan, an amino acid that's a precursor to serotonin and melatonin, is found in turkey, milk, cheese, eggs, and nuts. Complex carbohydrates can increase tryptophan availability to the brain. Some people find that a small snack combining protein and carbohydrates, like a piece of whole grain toast with peanut butter or yogurt with granola, helps them sleep. Caffeine is a stimulant that blocks adenosine receptors, masking sleepiness. Even if you feel you've habituated to caffeine's effects, it still affects your brain and can interfere with sleep. Caffeine has a half-life of about 5 hours, meaning that half of the caffeine from a cup of coffee consumed at 3 p.m. is still in your system at 8 p.m. Individual sensitivity varies, but as a general rule, avoiding caffeine after early afternoon is wise. Remember that caffeine isn't just in coffee. It's in tea, chocolate, many sodas, and energy drinks. Nicotine is also a stimulant and can disrupt sleep. Smokers often experience nicotine withdrawal during the night, which can cause frequent awakenings. Quitting smoking improves sleep quality, though withdrawal initially may temporarily worsen sleep. As discussed, alcohol might help you fall asleep initially, but disrupts sleep later in the night and reduces sleep quality. It's best avoided, especially close to bedtime. Managing stress and worry is crucial for good sleep. Stress activates the sympathetic nervous system and HPA axis, generating arousal that's incompatible with sleep. Developing effective stress management strategies can improve both waking life and sleep. These might include regular relaxation practice, such as progressive muscle relaxation, deep breathing, or meditation. Even just 10 to 20 minutes of relaxation practice daily can reduce overall arousal levels. Physical exercise, which helps discharge physical tension and can improve mood and reduce anxiety. Time management and problem-solving skills, which can reduce the sources of stress in your life. Setting boundaries around work, learning to say no to excessive demands, and protecting time for rest and leisure. Connecting with supportive friends and family, as social support buffers the effects of stress. Establishing a pre-sleep routine signals to your body that it's time to wind down. This routine should be relaxing and consistent. It might include activities like taking a warm bath or shower. The subsequent drop in body temperature after you get out can promote sleepiness. Reading something relaxing, but not in bed, unless reading in bed is already a well-established sleep cue for you. Listening to calming music or a guided relaxation recording. Practicing gentle stretching or yoga. Journaling or writing down any worries or tasks for tomorrow to clear them from your mind. The routine should start at about the same time each night and should last 30 minutes to an hour. It should be genuinely relaxing, not just another set of tasks to rush through. If you find yourself lying awake worrying, try the worry time technique. Set aside 15 to 20 minutes earlier in the day, well before bedtime, specifically for addressing your concerns. During this time, write down your worries and, when possible, action steps you can take. When worries arise at bedtime, remind yourself that you have a designated time to deal with them and you don't need to solve everything right now. Mindfulness practices can help with racing thoughts and rumination. Instead of trying to stop thinking, which paradoxically makes thinking more persistent, practice observing your thoughts without engaging with them. Notice that you're thinking, acknowledge the thought, and gently redirect your attention to your breathing or bodily sensations. With practice, this becomes easier and can reduce the power of intrusive thoughts to keep you awake. It's important to have realistic expectations about sleep. Not every night will be perfect. Occasional poor sleep is normal and doesn't mean your insomnia is returning or that you're failing at sleep. The goal isn't to never have a bad night, but to have enough good nights that you feel rested and function well overall. Similarly, understand that sleep needs vary. The often cited 8 hours is an average, not a requirement. Some people feel fine with 7 hours, others need 9. Quality matters as much as quantity. It's better to get 6 hours of consolidated, refreshing sleep than to lie in bed for 9 hours having fragmented, poor-quality sleep. Finally, be patient with yourself. Whether you're implementing sleep hygiene changes, working through CBTI, or tapering off sleep medication, improvement takes time. sleep won't necessarily get better immediately. In fact, with techniques like sleep restriction, it might briefly get worse before it gets better. Trust the process, stick with the strategies that are evidence-based, and be compassionate with yourself along the way. Conclusion: the backward century. We began this journey with a paradox. How can you be asleep and awake at the same time? How can trying to sleep make you more awake? How can people who are convinced they haven't slept actually show hours of sleep on brain monitoring? Now, after exploring the neuroscience, psychology, history, and treatment of insomnia, we can see how these paradoxes resolve. But more importantly, we can now see something that changes the entire story we just told. Remember how we traced the history of sleep research? From Kleitman's pioneering work in the 1920s, to the discovery of REM sleep in 1953, to decades of medication development, to the eventual emergence of CBTI in the 1980s? Here's what that timeline actually reveals, and this is the revelation that recontextualizes everything. For nearly a century, the entire medical establishment was fighting the wrong battle. When sleeping pills were developed and prescribed to millions, they were trying to force sleep, to chemically override the brain's wakefulness. When doctors told patients to try harder, to relax and fall asleep, they were unknowingly activating the exact arousal systems that needed to quiet down. When sleep hygiene advice suggested spending more time in bed to catch up on lost sleep, it was inadvertently weakening the homeostatic sleep drive that makes natural sleep possible. Every single one of these approaches treated insomnia as a problem of insufficient sleep. The logic seemed unassailable. If you can't sleep, you need more sleep. Get more sleep however you can. Pills, willpower, extra time in bed. But here's what we now know with scientific certainty. Insomnia is not fundamentally a problem of insufficient sleep. It's a problem of excessive arousal that happens to prevent sleep. This distinction isn't semantic. It's the difference between treatments that fail and treatments that work. It explains why sleeping pills, despite inducing sedation, don't cure insomnia. You wake up still hyper-aroused, still anxious about sleep, still trapped in the same patterns. It explains why trying harder to sleep makes insomnia worse. It explains why all those perpetuating behaviors that seemed so logical, spending more time in bed, worrying about your sleep, monitoring every symptom, were actually feeding the problem. And it reveals something almost shocking. The treatment that finally works, CBTI, succeeds precisely because it does the opposite of what 6 decades of sleep medicine recommended. Instead of trying to get more sleep, it restricts sleep. Instead of staying in bed hoping sleep will come, it requires getting out of bed. Instead of trying harder, it teaches letting go. Think about what this means for everyone in that historical narrative we traced. All those scientists who worked so hard to develop better sleeping pills. They were brilliant researchers solving the wrong problem. All those doctors who prescribed benzodiazepines to millions of desperate patients. They were trying to help, but the framework was backwards. All those insomnia sufferers who followed medical advice to spend more time in bed, to keep trying, to take their medication faithfully. They were doing exactly what they were told, but what they were told was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what insomnia actually is. This is why the paradoxes we started with exist. The person with paradoxical insomnia who feels awake all night while sleeping isn't broken. Their brain is in a state of hyperarousal that persists even during sleep, creating the genuine experience of wakefulness. The harder you try, the worse it gets. Paradox isn't just psychological. It's the inevitable result of trying to force a passive process that can only happen when you stop trying. And here's the deepest revelation of all. The solution to insomnia isn't about sleep at all. It's about arousal. It's about breaking the conditioned associations. It's about dismantling the perpetuating factors. It's about addressing the hyperarousal that prevents sleep, not about trying to create sleep despite the hyperarousal. CBTI works because it finally got the problem right. It doesn't fight insomnia by trying to force more sleep. It removes the obstacles to natural sleep. It's not about doing more, it's about doing less, but doing the right less. Less time in bed, less trying, less worry, less effort. And this reframes everything we discussed. Kleitman's discovery of REM sleep? It revealed that sleep has architecture and purpose, but it took 50 more years to realize that understanding sleep wouldn't cure insomnia. Understanding arousal would. The neuroscience findings of hyperarousal, elevated cortisol, persistent brain activity. These weren't just interesting correlates of insomnia. They were the actual problem masquerading as a sleep problem. The three-factor model of perpetuating factors? This was the breakthrough that finally shifted focus from not enough sleep to too much arousal maintained by behaviors and thoughts. The health consequences we described, cardiovascular disease, metabolic dysfunction, mental health risks, these aren't caused by sleep deprivation alone. They're caused by chronic hyperarousal, which is why treating the hyperarousal via CBTI can prevent these outcomes in ways that chemically induced sleep cannot. Even the two insomnia subtypes, with and without objective short sleep, make sense through this lens. Both involve subjective hyperarousal, but only one involves sufficient physiological hyperarousal to actually reduce sleep time, leading to different health trajectories. The entire story we just told isn't really about sleep at all. It's about arousal, and about how long it took medicine to realize this. It's about the difference between treating symptoms and understanding mechanisms. It's about how sometimes the most obvious answer, if you can't sleep, you need more sleep, can be exactly wrong. For those lying awake tonight, this reframing offers something more valuable than techniques or tips. It offers a different way to understand what's happening. You're not failing at sleep. You're experiencing hyperarousal that's preventing sleep, and hyperarousal responds to specific interventions, behavioral, cognitive, and sometimes pharmacological, but not to trying harder to sleep. Your brain knows how to sleep. That hasn't changed. What changed is that your brain learned to be hyper-aroused in situations where it should be calm. And just as that was learned, it can be unlearned. The path forward isn't about conquering sleep, it's about releasing arousal. It's not about forcing rest, it's about allowing it. The revolution in sleep medicine wasn't discovering a better sleeping pill. It was discovering that we'd been aiming at the wrong target all along. So if this exploration has given you new understanding, consider subscribing for more journeys into the hidden patterns of psychology and the mind. Consider sharing this with someone else who might be lying awake, still trying to force what can only be allowed. Sleep well, or if sleep eludes you tonight, rest well in the knowledge that every night is a new opportunity to practice doing less, trying less, and trusting more in the processes that evolution built into your biology. The paradox that opened this journey has resolved into clarity. Insomnia was never about sleep. It was always about arousal, and understanding that difference, as we've seen, changes everything.